All right. So, the Lord's rest. Right before we start, I just need the clicker. Perfect. All right. So I got a question. It's kind of a silly question to start off with, but who here feels like they need rest? Yes. Many people raise their hand like, I need rest. I'm tired. Okay? We live in an extremely exhausted society. All right? We live in an extremely exhausted society. We run from one thing to the next. We have cluttered calendars that have competing events that are going for the same time, and we're trying to look and say, well, how can I make it to here and make it to here? Okay? We look at our calendars and we're like, oh, I have like a small pocket of time, like I can go and attend this whole graduation party. We don't leave any margins in our lives. We have problems with our families. We have, social problems and concerns that we know we need to give some attention to. We know that we need to sit down and try and work things out, but we're looking at our calendars and we're like, I don't know when I'm going to do that. I got to get to work. After work, I have this meeting, and after that, I'm meeting up with some friends. I have no idea when I'm going to sit down and figure out how to work out this problem I have with my spouse or my child or one of these friends or a family member. And we think that over time, these problems will just kind of work itself out, but we know that that's a lie, and that these problems that we, have that we don't necessarily work out or have the time to work out, they will rear their ugly head later on in life. We have jobs that keep us working into the wee hours of night, and we have, students with, if you're a student, you have academic responsibilities that take you to 2 or 3 in the morning trying to finish up papers and get this in on time and all those things. We use our trips to the bathroom to send emails, we take our phone and take a quick email, send that off, respond to a person in a text that you've been meaning to respond to for a while. And then when we go on vacation, what comes with us? Mr. Laptop comes with us, all right? I'm just going to do some light work, while I'm sitting on the beach. Or I'm going to be at the pool and I'll just, send a couple quick emails or something like that. Even when we go on vacation, we don't know how to rest. We don't know how to rest. And then we wonder why we're looking around and everybody's exhausted. Our eyes at the age of 20, we have eyes of a 60-year-old. All right? It's no surprise that we need rest. But I think we need to look at, how do we rest currently? Because I think how we choose to rest says something about how we view the importance of resting. How we choose to rest says something of what value we place on resting. All right? How do we rest right now? We crash. I can't wait to do nothing. Or we sit in front of the TV and we veg. Or we wait for that perfect time when our favorite sitcom is showing the marathon. And that's when I rest. I watch all 24 episodes of season 8 all night long. That's what I do to rest. Some of us go shopping either online or in stores. Some of us go on eating, binges. And some of us have our addictions, and habits, either to social media or something like that, where we just kind of waste time. I mean, there's so many people who are probably right before bed, sitting in bed, and just kind of scrolling through Facebook. Oh, so-and-so got engaged. Oh, they had a baby. Oh, I don't like that one. All right, that's what we do to rest. That's what resting is. That's how we kind of decompress. Now the question is, how often do we rest? Most of us are resting whenever we get a chance. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I'm going to rest when I get a chance. Some of us rest by sleeping for 14 hours. All right? I woke up at 2 p.m. today. Like, I've never been able to do that. I'm absolutely amazed at how people can do that, but that's how some people rest. It's like they go, and then boom, I don't have to work or do anything this Saturday. I'm going to wake up at 2 p.m. All right? Or some of us micro rest, okay? We never really have any blocks of time to rest, but we have like little like spaces in our schedule. So, when do we rest? The most famous 20-minute cat nap at your desk at work. That's how we rest. That's what I did. Okay, like no joke. Okay, I'll tell you a funny story. Back when I was in residency, I was so tired, and I always just like everybody else, I have a really hard time staying awake after lunch. And I had clinic in the afternoon, and I had a patient who had a mental disorder who was talking to me, and I fell asleep in front of him, to where he looked at me. He's like, "Hey, are you listening to me?" I was like, yes, I heard everything he said. But like, so exhausted, no rest, and that's what happens. Our body forces us to micro rest. All right? So that's how we currently rest. That's how we currently rest. But we want to ask ourselves, like, why do we rest like this? Why do I rest like this? All right? And I think there are many reasons, but I'm going to highlight two. We rest in order to go back at it and to produce, okay? We rest in order because, I know I have to get this work done, but I know I need to rest in order to do that. So rest kind of becomes a nuisance. Like, if you ask me, I would prefer that I'd be able to work consistently and just get everything done. All right? But I know, okay, my body can't do that, and I can't keep up with that, so I'm going to rest so I can get back up and go to work. All right? Or I'm going to rest a little bit when I get back home from work so that I can go and do more work and be productive at home. The other reason why we rest is because we've just reached a limit. We've reached a limit. Like, our bodies have gone to the point where they just say, enough is enough. Like, you have to sleep. And that's how some people sleep for 14 hours because they haven't slept for 14 days. So we have a problem with rest. We reach our emotional, physical, mental, barriers, and our body says, you must rest because we hit a wall. But when you think about everything we just talked about, it says something about what value we put on rest and how we view rest as part of our lives. We rest because we have to in order to go on, not because we see it as essential on how we live. We rest because we have to in order to keep going on, not because we see it as being essential part of how we live. Okay, we rest because we have to. And that is all false rest. That is not true rest. Because we all live exhausted all the time. It's false rest. But when we give ourselves such little rest, okay? When we give ourselves such little rest, you kind of want to ask the question, are we afraid of rest? What are we afraid of if we rest? If you look at yourself and you look at your schedule and you're kind of coming up on an afternoon, and you're like, all right, I actually have an opportunity to do nothing. How many of us sees it? Or how many of us have voices that come in our mind? Voices that begin to say but if you rest, your production goes down. If you rest, you might get that unwanted label of lazy. If you rest, there's always somebody who's gunning a little bit harder than you, going for the same position that you want, And because they're not resting, they're going to get it. How many of us are afraid of the voice that says if we actually have a little bit of rest, we would realize that certain things in our lives that we are doing are wrong? That behaviors that we have indoctrinated into our weekly habits are not life-giving, but bringing about death, but at a slow pace. How many of us would look at certain relationships that we have and be like, I really shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have acted like that. I shouldn't have said those things. But if I sit down and give myself a little bit of time to rest, I know I'm going to come to that conclusion. So, I'm going to keep going. I think one of the things that we are afraid of when we rest is ourselves. That we're afraid of what we will find in ourselves. We are afraid of the voices that we will face. I heard a psychologist say that, like, when you're talking about rest, is like, if people actually rested, some of them feel that they would die because they would have to face the reality of what's going on inside of them if they rested. But if they stay in motion, okay, they don't have to think about it. They don't have to deal with it. They're just going along. They're producing, they're doing their things, they're getting it done, they're getting promotions, they're moving on to this school, that school, getting this job, like, find a relationship, I'm in the relationship, let's just keep on going. Like, when we don't rest, we just kind of move along. I don't have to deal with things. We can look at certain people and say, look at their lifestyle, and we can say, this person is going to hit a disaster because of the way that they are living. We could see it on the outside from a mile away. You ask the person, like, look, you need to slow down in life. You need to rest. And they're like, no, I'm fine. It's okay. I'll rest later. Okay, I'll rest later. Standing back, we're like, this is not going to go well. It's like when I always love it, like when I see like a little kid like running around. Don't think poorly of me, okay? But when you see a little kid running around in a banquet hall, what are they ultimately going to do? One of these little kids running around in a banquet hall is going to run into a table. They're going to run into a table. Like, I see it. I look at it. And I think it's funny. Assuming they're okay. But I'm looking at him like, this kid's running. He doesn't stop. He doesn't look left or right. He doesn't see in front of him. And he runs into a table. Of course, I stop and be like, he's okay, no blood, like getting up, 4 limbs are moving. Then I laugh, okay? I could see it from a mile away, all right? Why? Because the kid doesn't want to rest. You look at adults, same thing. Like, they're going, and you're looking, you're like, your life is going to be a disaster in 5-10 years from now because you can't keep up the same pace. And they're like, no, I'm fine, don't worry. Just like the kid, you're like, slow down. No, I'm fine. Boom, table. Boom, crisis in life. Why? Because we're not resting. But I want to ask ourselves, what does God have to say about rest? Does God have anything to say about His creation and rest? He created us. He formed us in His image and in His likeness. Okay? So why don't we ask the Creator about rest? It's not something that we think about like too frequently in the Bible, but let's just kind of like dig through and say like, okay, well, what does God have to say about rest? Because as believers, we believe He created us, and so He kind of fashioned us in His image. Let's see if He's got anything to say. What's the one verse that comes to everybody's mind when we think about, okay, what does God have to say about rest? Seventh day in creation. Good, so let's go. Genesis 2, verses 2 and 3. And on the seventh day, God ended His work, which He had done, and He rested on the seventh day from all His work which He had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it He rested from all His work which God had created and made. All right? So God in creation, which are the 7 days of creation, He looked at the seventh day and He said, look, on this day, I've done all the work. On the seventh day, it's going to be a day of rest. Unlike any of the other 6 days, He looked at the day of rest and He said, this is a special day. This is a holy day. I'm going to make it different than all the other days in the week. All the other days of the week, all the other 6 days, I was doing something. I was creating the sun, creating the moon, creating the plants, creating the birds and the fish and the animals, and creating man and dealing with his loneliness, and then creating woman. I did all these things 6 days. Seventh day, I'm going to rest. I'm going to rest. But you'd think like, okay, well, God is doing a lot. And He looked at the 6 days and He says, okay, these are 6 days, these are days for work. Like, work produced a lot. Work produced a lot of amazing things. The mountains, the seas, the oceans, the river, nature, everything, our whole ecosystem. He produced so much, humanity. But yet, out of all this, of the 7 days, He looked at 6 and was like, okay, these are good. Seventh day. That's holy. That's sanctified. That's set apart. This is the one day that I really like. So He set apart the seventh day, and He sanctified it and made it different. When we say made it different, that's what it is to sanctify. He made it different than all the other days. So God Himself, all right, are we done with rest? Or do we think that God has more to say about rest? I got still 40 minutes to talk about what God has to say about rest, all right? So we are not done. Let's go on to the next part of rest. So when we kind of move through the Old Testament, all right, we get to the time of Moses and the Israelites in Egypt, all right? So after Joseph brought his family to Egypt due to the famine. They lived in Egypt. The children of Israel multiplied and grew in number. And then the Egyptians, like Pharaoh, forgot about his good relationship with Joseph and looked at all the Israelites and said, whoa, we got to control these people. Let's put them to work. So they worked, and they worked for many, many, many generations, and they grew in a huge number. And then finally, the work became too much. They cried out, and God sent them Moses and the 10 plagues to deliver them from Egypt, or deliver them from Pharaoh. And so, God took them from slavery, or took them out of slavery into a better situation, a situation where there is rest. All right? He took them from a situation where they had to work to survive into a situation where He would provide. Okay? Either they worked or they died. All right? But God was saying, like, no, you don't have to work to survive. I will show you how to survive by relying on me. So He was changing their mindset. All right, if we look at Deuteronomy 5:12 and 15, it says, observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. So this is the first time that we begin to understand, well, what is this Sabbath that He's talking about? All right, but before we get into Sabbath, like, the idea is that God is saying, like, you were slaves in Egypt. You had to work. If you didn't work hard, you were going to die. Now I took you out of Egypt. Stop working as if your survival depends on it. I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to show you that you can live without having to work yourself into the ground. All right? So what were the ways that God was telling His people, you don't have to work in order to survive? Some of us work in order to survive, and what I mean by that is, remember I said, like, some of us feel like we will die if we rest, okay? So we keep working in order to survive so I don't have to deal with things of life. God was saying, like, look, that's not the way I want you to live. I want you to understand that I will provide when you rest, all right? And He did 3 things, okay? that taught them this. First one was manna. Exodus 16:4. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather certain quota every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not." So what happened? They left Egypt. Moses led them through the Red Sea. They crossed into the Promised Land. They got there, no food, no water. They're in the desert. How are you going to make water without bread? What's going to happen? And so the people were afraid, and they started to complain. "Moses, you brought us out here. Now we're going to die." So Moses took the complaint to God, and God said, "All right, did you not see the 10 things I just did in Egypt? You don't think that I can provide for you? I will make it rain down manna." What was the rule of manna? You can gather for 6 days. Okay? But on the 7th day, there's not going to be manna. But what do you get? On the 6th day, he gave you a double portion to last one more day. Okay? Law was, if you gathered double portion from Monday to Tuesday, the extra would rot by Tuesday morning. You were to gather what he was providing. Okay? And then, but on the 6th day, so Friday before Sabbath, which was Saturday, I'll give you a double portion, and that double portion will last you through the Sabbath. You'll see that you don't have to work, and I will provide for you. I will provide what you need. So, he provided manna to remind them that I will provide for you when you don't work. Okay? Don't worry, you don't have to read this, but let's look at the 10 Commandments. All right? Here's a screen, shot of the 10 Commandments, just by looking at it. If you were to take a guess, which commandment would you think is important? So here, you can see that here's 1, here's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if you're going to guess, which commandment do you think is probably important to God? Huh? The first one, or first one is 1, but, huh? You say the first one, no other gods before me. Okay. Look, I go by a rule, if it's got a lot of words, it's probably important. Okay? So I'm looking, and I was like, all right, number 2 looks pretty sizable, but 4 takes the cake. Okay? God spent a lot of time talking about commandment number 4. All right? Giving the most detail about number 4. Okay? Let's take a look and say, well, what's commandment number 4? Oh, sorry, I didn't put it in there. So number 4, I'll read it for you. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the 7th day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is with you in your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it, which is made it holy. Okay? No other commandment does God spend more time talking about than the Sabbath. Resting. Doing no work. It was an important day. Interestingly, okay, let's kind of take a look at number 2, because I'll be honest, number 2 comes in close second. Okay? Comes in a close second. I'll summarize number 2. You shall not make for yourself carved images. Okay? You'll not make carved images. Meaning, don't worship things other than God. And he goes on to explain more, but this is going to be important, and we're going to get to it in a little bit. So we have manna, we have Sabbath, which is a day of rest where God will provide. All right? Was that enough? No, God has a lot to say about rest. As if one day a week wasn't enough. Okay? As if one day a week wasn't enough rest. God wanted to up the ante. So there's a sabbatical year. A whole year. Let's read about the sabbatical year. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years shall prune your vineyard, and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard for a year. Where are we going to get all the food for a whole year? I'll provide it in year 6. Provide it in year 6, and what you harvest in year 6 will be enough for year 7. But in year 7, you take a rest. You take a rest, the land takes a rest, the animals take a rest, we all take a rest. I will provide. I will provide. It's not in here, but he took it another year. Further, there was the year of Jubilee. So like after, 7 times 7, we got to 49, okay? There'd be another year of Jubilee where we didn't rest, or where we rested. Okay, so that's all Old Testament. What about the New Testament? God have anything to say about resting in the New Testament? Jesus demonstrated 2 more reasons, among many, as why Sabbath rest was important. All right? Sabbath was a time of worship and a time for healing. Okay? And so if we look at the Sabbath day as Jesus walked about in the New Testament, all right, we read frequently that on the Sabbath he went to the synagogue to worship. All right? We also read that many times like he went off by himself to pray. We also see that on the Sabbath he performed many miracles. Okay? So he's tying in to Sabbath that not only is it rest, but it is a time of worship and contemplation, and it is a time that brings about healing. Healing. Healing to those problems and crises that we don't have any time to deal with because we don't have rest. We don't have appropriate time for rest. Jesus was saying that Sabbath was a time for healing. So, I think God has a lot to say about rest. I think we have a lot to think about rest. But I know that somebody here is thinking like, all right, what if I just don't want to rest? What's going to happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? Israelites did the same thing. And they're like, you know what? The Sabbath was nice. We did it for a little bit, but life just got busy. We had a lot to do. We had trading to do. We had buildings to build. We had a city to establish. Like, we didn't have time for Sabbath. All right? If we don't rest, either life or God will make us rest. Okay? Let's go to 2 Chronicles 36:21. Are there consequences for not resting? There are. 2 Chronicles 36:21 says, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. As long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbaths to fulfill 70 years. So what this is saying is that 7 years was the time that the Israelites were sent into exile. And what God was saying is like, okay, you disregarded the Sabbath for so many years. I'm going to collect every one of those years. So for 70 years, the land will lie dormant. There will be no work. You will be in exile. Because you need to learn rest. Because rest, without resting, without Sabbathing, without taking time to stop and look and contemplate about God and to see His hand providing, what had happened to the children of Israel? They worshiped other gods. They saw that their own production was the sustenance by which they lived. They lost focus. They created carved images for themselves, which was number 2 on the do not list, the do not do list. And so God is saying, look, I need to collect you back. I need to kind of wake you up. So I'm going to send you for 70 years to make up for all the time that you lost, all the time that you didn't respect the Sabbath. And I'm going to let the land rest. After 70 years, I'll come back. I'll let you come back. Some people live by this model. I'll rest when I'm in the grave. Okay? I'll rest when I'm in the grave. Death will find you far before you find the grave. Death will find you as you walk far before you find the grave, if you live by this model. All right. Why does God have so much to say about rest? Because God's reasoning for rest is relational. God's reasoning for rest is relational, and it's the relationship between Him and me. His reason behind rest is for our relationship. So, God desires to commune with us. God desires to provide. God desires that we know what it is to rely on Him, to trust Him, that He will give us what we need. And when we lose sight of that, life catches up with us. Things happen. We are forced to rest, either through a crisis that brings us a screeching halt to our daily activities, which we have to deal with, or we just hit our wall and we can't go on. Whatever the situation will be, we have to rest. We have to rest. So after the exile, as they were coming back, one of my favorite Bible characters, Nehemiah, was in charge of rebuilding the wall in Jerusalem. And after they reconstructed the wall and rebuilt the wall, they opened up the book, which they had forgotten about. And they had Ezra, who was the high priest at that time, read through the laws. And as they're hearing the laws, they realized, we really went the wrong way for those 70, which led us to those 70 years of exile. So we need to reinstitute some of the laws. So Nehemiah highlights 3 things that they instituted. I'm going to highlight one of those 3 things. What do you think that they reinstituted? Sabbath. They reinstituted in Nehemiah 10:31, he says, if the people of the land brought wares or any grain to sell on the Sabbath day, we would not buy from them on the Sabbath or on a holy day, and we would not forego the 7th year's produce. So they looked at themselves. This was like a kind of coming to their senses, realize like, whoa, we started with the Sabbath, we're doing well, we lost the Sabbath, we ended up in exile, we came back, it has not been easy to rebuild, it is not easy to rebuild the city, and even though we need to make the best of every opportunity to trade and buy and sell in order to rebuild the economy, we're not going to do it on the Sabbath day, because that's what got us into trouble in the first place. They reprioritized something into their weekly schedule that forced them to rely on God's provisions. They instituted something concrete into their weekly schedule that put them in a position to have to rely on God and His provisions for them. They reprioritized God. So several months ago, I'll tell you a quick story. Several months ago, I was driving and flat tire, and you always get the flat tires the worst times, right? Oh, I remember when I got the flat tire. It was Holy Week. That's when I got the flat tire. Quite possibly the absolute worst week for me. Got a flat tire, had to drive on a donut, and I think I did it for a week. And finally, after I took a week to recover from Holy Week, I finally went on a Saturday to the tire shop down the street from me. I pulled in, and I was like, gosh, nobody's here. Walk up, and lights are off. It's what's going on? I see a little sign in the window. It says, and you shall keep the Sabbath holy. I was like, Come on, it's Saturday. Like, I don't got time in the middle of the week to do this. Like, just fix the tire on a Saturday. But this tire company says, no, we're not going to open up on Saturday. How are you going to survive? Like, everybody takes their car to fix it on a Saturday. You're an auto shop. Open up. It makes sense. No, we're closed on a Saturday. It's a holy day. Yet that tire company is sitting there, and they're doing quite well. And they survive off all the business that they have Monday through Friday. They do well. Inconvenient for me. I didn't like it. But they're doing fine. They're doing fine. Anybody ever hear of B&H Photo? So B&H Photo is the largest non-chain photo and video equipment store in the United States, and it is the second largest worldwide, second only to a store in Tokyo. This store is centered in the heart of New York. On a daily basis, they see 8,000 to 9,000 customers in their store. Yet 70% of their business is done through the online store. Okay? This camera company, this B&H Photo, closes every Friday at 1 p.m. and is closed all day Saturday. Black Friday is quite possibly the most popular shopping day. It is the most popular shopping day, hands down. You would think that this company would open up on Friday, Black Friday. Come on, everybody buys electronics. I went online, I Googled the store. The store's enormous. They have so many gadgets and video equipment, and if you're a techie junkie, this is your heaven, okay? They have so much. But even on Black Friday, they will close. Not only do their stores close, but they close the online store as well. So you can look at their website, but you cannot make an order, you cannot call customer service, and you cannot get any help from a representative online or in the store. This camera company was asked and said, okay, you guys are a big business. If you guys would open up on Black Friday, you would boost your sales. If you guys would just let the online system go. The director of communications responded to this inquiry of, why don't you guys open up? This was his quote. We respond to a higher authority. We respond to a higher authority. Yes, it's a Jewish company. Okay? It's a Jewish company. And the tire company down the street from me, that's a Jewish company. But the reason why I bring these examples up, because too frequently we look at our lives and we say, if I don't continue to work, things will fall apart. I won't get to where I want to be. Somebody else will slip in. Or my production will go down. My production goes down, then my job is in jeopardy. We look at all these different things, and society continues to beat down on us, be productive, be productive, be productive. We have our phones that are with us all the time, email that we're so easily reachable, watches that connect to our phone that is in our pocket because this takes too much time, so now I have to look at it on the watch, okay? We're beat down with this need to be so productive in life. And that invades in our ability to rest. And when it invades in our ability and starts to take away our rest, that takes away from our relationship with God. It takes away from our concrete ways of trusting God to provide when we rest. Believe it or not, that when we rest, I know this is a crazy thought, but believe it or not, that when we rest and we stop, the world doesn't collapse. God holds it up just fine. Social media doesn't miss us. Our jobs, our companies don't go under when we rest. Our value as individuals does not decline when we rest. when we don't rest, we miss God. We miss the relationship with God. We miss a genuine relationship with God when we rest. When we don't rest, we miss that genuine relationship with God. And God has placed a very, very high value on resting. He has spent so much time through the course of history and through his Son, Jesus Christ, teach us that rest was important. Not like binge resting, not micro resting, not like I do nothing rest. Resting with a purpose. Resting because the rest of your life depends on how you rest. Resting because the way you live life, the lens in which you view life, the lens in which you interact with people, is highly dependent on how you rest. And I know for students especially, I know that this is a very challenging thought to look at yourselves and say I have so much studying to do. I have so many reports to do. I have to answer to this person, answer to this person. I mean, you're the lowest on the totem pole, and actually the totem pole stands on top of you. So I appreciate it. I get it. But I want to remind us and remind you that this world ultimately will respond to a higher authority. And that when you take the time to rest God's way and rest in Him, He will provide what you need. Don't make the same mistake as the Israelites of saying, I'll provide and I'll produce and I'll make it work. It got them into a whole heap of trouble. We need to rest, but we need to rest the right way. Next week, we'll talk about resting the right way, okay? But this week, we have to see that resting is sacred. Resting is godly. Resting was designed by God. He didn't ask us to do something that He didn't do Himself. But resting with a purpose is very different than what we're probably doing currently to rest. And so we'll talk about that next week. If at some point you have actually worked on your rule of life, we've done it in different situations. If you have done your rule of life, bring that next week because there's a box in your rule of life on rest. And we will address that next week. Any questions?
In the 70s, when I first came here, Sunday was a day of rest.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started to open 12 o'clock after the Mass.
Yeah.
And after that, they open all
Yeah. I mean, there's so many, there are not so many, but there are examples out there of people who take this seriously. I give Chick-fil-A a lot of credit. Every Sunday they close.
That's right.
Sure, I like chicken, but okay, close on Sunday. We fast 2/3 of the year anyway. So it's important for us to think about how we rest. It's a matter of life and death. So stand up and let's pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. We ask you, Lord, that you would continue to let this message soak in our minds, to see that truly you care about rest. And you use our rest to do amazing things, Lord. But it's always a challenge to stop. It's a challenge to see rest through your eyes. And Lord, help us to take this seriously, to know that we can't escape a life of no rest, that we can't continue to move on through life just producing one thing after the next. It will catch up to us, and it will bring death to our doorstep far before we find death in the grave. Lord, there is godly rest, and there is sacred rest. Help us to find that and see its importance in our lives through the intercessions of all your saints who have pleased you from the beginning. Hear us as we say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as 'tis in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the now the love of God the Father, the grace of his only begotten Son, our Lord God and Savior Jesus Christ, the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Go in peace. The Lord be with you.